Hi everyone, welcome. Yeah, you saw right. What I've got here are 3 chestnuts, and the majority of what was prepared was eaten, but these 3 were left over, so I sank them into a cup of water, and I rested a spoon over it so all 3 of them would remain submerged. They wanted to float to the surface, and these chestnuts have been soaking now for, say, 3 days or more, 3 or 4 days. And then I figured since I had 3 and I've got 2 bins to feed, I would place a cut in half chestnut as well as a whole chestnut into each system. And along with that, there's going to be some yummy frozen fruits and veggies over there. I got some more bedding that we can add. So let's get to feeding these little guys. These European night crawlers have been living in these 2 systems for 50 days now. And we originally got into a pattern of checking in on them every 12th day. So on day 0 they got feeding number 1, day 12 they got feeding number 2, day 24 they got feeding number 3, and day 36 they got feeding number 4. And today, instead of going with the 12-day intervals like we've been doing up until the last check-in, today we're now 14 days downstream of the last feeding. And I'm trying to remember, I think the feeding in these 2 systems was fairly similar to a feeding, at least one other feeding that I can think of, where we fed something that I don't really use very frequently in my worm bins, which was some plums. And I think plums went in last time with some pumpkin as well. And so I'm curious, after 14 days, how are they doing with that feeding? I mean, a lot of times we'll take an old coffee filter, like one of these, and then I'll just kind of tear it open and flatten it out, and it'll become the feeding zone indicator. And in a way, you can even see some of where we had placed feeding zone indicators out onto these systems, but the worms have decimated those coffee filters. You could barely make them out. But there definitely are feeding zone indicators, and you can even tell there's a nice little recess right where we fed. I mean, from where you're at, maybe it's not so easy to see, but from where I'm at, I could see it pretty clearly. It's pretty cool looking. I think this is the stem of a pepper, maybe. Very cool. So let's get to it. These little guys, we were waiting for all the people's comments to come in from when I launched the system, and I believe there was probably a subsequent, perhaps, addition of some more worms at some point along the way. So we always take everyone's guesstimates for how many worms they thought were released into the systems and then average them together. So I don't know how many people commented, probably more than a half a dozen, perhaps 8 or 10 people commented, where we took everyone's guesses, and that includes me too. I throw my guess in the hat just like everyone else, and then we came up with some estimates for how many worms we believe are living in these systems. And I don't know why 2960, 2972. I don't know, for some reason I've got these numbers floating around in my head. I did rewatch the video from last time where we had my information board where those numbers had been announced formally, and they were written down so that I can not screw up telling you the number correctly. And I think we even made a comment about how there was only a difference of 12 worms. I think it was maybe bin number 2 now has the greater number of worms. That's the one where we added worms or something. But it only exceeded the estimate of how many worms live in bin number 1 by a dozen. And we figured if we took half that and moved the worms over, then we would actually have 2 systems with identical numbers of worms living in them. But that seemed a little bit silly, so we opted not to do that. So I've got, let's see, I tore this big napkin in half. Then I've got a piece of paper towel, I believe, and another flimsier napkin, not like this big heavy-duty napkin. I'm always collecting napkins, paper towels, all kinds of things that I use just to whatever, eat, you know, wipe your mouth after you're done eating, place your utensil on it. But instead of chucking stuff like this, I find myself always shoving them in my pocket so that I can at some point add them to my worm bin maintenance supplies. Alright, now we're getting somewhere. Even during yesterday's check-in, I meant to feed coffee and I totally spaced out and forgot to do that. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're down to perhaps the last 2 slices of this banana bread. So I believe it's time for that to go as well. Let's be fair. Let's break the small piece in half, break the large piece in half, and then everyone gets the same amount. We don't want these little guys quabbling over the food. But now, you know, I've got my water bottle here, and I wasn't quite sure if I would want to, but I'm thinking now that I do want to, only because the coffee fairly dry, the napkins, paper towels, all dry. Even the banana bread is a little bit on the dry side, I would say, at this point. So rather than putting a whole bunch of stuff in here that's going to require that the surrounding materials give up moisture to soak into these things, let's just get ahead of the curve. Get them damp, get them cozy so the worms feel comfortable cruising right into this stuff and not hesitating. So here too, the things that we want to divvy out fairly. Chestnut's just one of those things I don't really feed to worm bins very frequently, so I'm not even sure what to expect here. Hopefully the worms like it. And I guess as far as jalapeno goes, I've only got one. So we'll put it over there, and these guys get the not so hot whole pepper. Wait, no, look at that. Another jalapeno. So let's put this pepper core over here, and then I guess what remains is just some some asparagus, and I think I even see some onion, a couple pieces of onion going in. So nice little assortment of different fruits and veggies going in. And before we get to covering these feeding zones up, we'll drop in a little bit of grit to complement their meal. And you know, I've got my prepared bedding here. Why don't we keep going? These are night crawlers after all, and the night crawlers definitely do like the bedding material, as do all worms, but I guess they like it from the perspective of having the bedding material double as food for them too. So I think that's a pretty nice setup, and I don't know why, but for some reason I've just got this weird feeling like adding moisture is probably a good idea. I don't know why, but I'm sure the worms are not going to argue with me on that one. We haven't even explored the rest of the system outside of where the feedings have been applied, so we don't even know if we're in for a whole bunch of really damp conditions on the outer edges or not. But this way we can just feel for sure that what we've done over in the feeding zone is probably nice and cozy. So my first impressions of the material that I'm bringing in from the outer edges over here in bin number 1 is that it's got a nice moisture content to it. I don't think there's anything to worry about. The presence of worms in this stuff is pretty good indicator too that it's probably a good healthy environment. I see a good bit of bedding blended in. That's just something I've really been wanting to improve on lately. So I've been definitely focused on breaking away from my old habits of kind of never wanting to contaminate what appears to be pretty far along collection of castings. You know, I would never want to like let fresh bedding blend in there. It's like, oh my goodness, it's going to take forever for that bedding to break down now. It's I think it's something that I noticed from watching other worm channels where the material in the systems always had a whole bunch of stuff other than castings blended in, all kinds of stuff for the worms to live in. I mean, naturally there's examples when a system is definitely just castings only anymore. So, but I think just in general, like a system like this, 50 days of age, it's in its youth. You know, it's a very young system. If we really want the worms working the stuff, they can only do their thing with adequate amounts of moisture and bedding. So I have I guess with the moisture too. Something you don't see me doing much either. A little flying insect, you know. Might be a good idea for me to go grab my mosquito dunks BTI flakes. I think I've still got a little bit left. It wasn't really coming out of the dispenser very good anymore, so I had to pop open the large hole, and like these pretty good sized chunks were coming out. It didn't seem like there was much left of the more finely ground up stuff, but hopefully it still has, here we go, a little bit of effectiveness left. So here's the large hole, and there is some stuff still left in here, little chunks. So I think we'll just use what we've got remaining. It wasn't really my impression that there was insects here, but just that presence of that one flying insect that I saw cruising around a moment ago, I think just sort of sealed the deal, made me feel like, you know what, let's be on the side of prevention, and if there's any signs of little flying insects possibly getting comfortable in my systems, let's do what we can to show them that they're not welcome. Alright, as long as we're rinsing stuff off and cleaning things and adding moisture, might as well return some of the stuff that's on my gloves to the bin. Oh my goodness, look at these gloves. Perhaps these gloves don't even get saved for one more use. Maybe they'll go straight in the trash. Yeah, you know what? One more use. I think we can get one more use out of these, right? Alright, we don't need to get them perfectly clean because we've still got a little dirty work left here. All we got left to do, though, is to bring back our top covering newspapers, which are holding up really good. These are clearly, I could tell just from touching them how sturdy they are. These are 2 layers, or at least so it seems to me. I think this is a folded over double layer of paper. I could see it right there, but it doesn't want to come apart, so I'm not going to try to force it. Let's just leave it be. Bring on the plastic covers here too. Somehow I'm being very sloppy today. It seems like I'm dropping castings and debris and whatnot all over the place. Look at this, all this stuff. I thought I just cleaned this off, didn't I? That's alright. I'll just do what I usually do, which is I just let all this stuff totally dry. If you try cleaning stuff up now while it's all wet, it's going to just smear and make a big mess, bigger mess. So it seems like the cleanest way to tidy up in the wormery after a sloppy job is to give time for stuff to dry, and then it'll just get swept up with a little dust broom. So that's my trick, my tip of the day. All right, everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.